All right. Well, friends, I have 6:30, and if somebody else decides to jump in, we will do that. But this is a good little group. Connie and I were kind of talking with each other for a little bit before the rest of y'all joined, and purposefully, I mean, we advertised this, but purposefully, I kind of didn't get real aggressive with it, partly because my first time hosting Zoom, I just want to make sure I didn't foul things up because I have a habit of doing that with technology. But two, I just wanted to, this is a little different for me. I've never done a virtual study like this, but I do want to try this out because one of the things, as I just said, just seeing all of y'all and being able to interact with you and having some subject matter to talk about, but just being able to interact is, I've been looking forward to this. So let me say one thing and then we'll open with a prayer and then we'll start. So I am recording this for folks who either aren't available or for the more conspiracy-minded folks who have good reason in some sense to be with Zoom, who will be watching this on YouTube later. So I say that ahead of time so that you know that this is what you're saying is being recorded. And so, just keep that in mind when your comments. Got one more. I think this is Victoria coming on. Hold on one second. Victoria, I was just telling everybody, I'll repeat it for you. This is being recorded, so folks later on can watch it on YouTube. So I'm giving you the obligatory notice on that. So again, just keep that in mind for comments that you make, because we will post this to YouTube later. But other than that, that's pretty much it. Just we'll open with a prayer, and then we'll get the conversation going. The Lord be with you.
And also
with you.
And also with you. Gracious God, thank you for this time for us to be together. For those who will be listening in after this recording, who will listen to our conversation and the words of Henri Nouwen and be able to find your presence in the midst of this community and of his wise words. Grant that we may hold on fast to the promise of your love in this time in which we are longing for community and longing to be your beloved. Grant that we may know it through what we do tonight and the gift of life that you bestow upon us each and every day. In Jesus Christ we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So let me start with asking a question, and I don't think I necessarily have to mute all of you because there's not a whole big group, so I will not mute you all unless I do pick up some feedback. First of all, question is, has everybody read this book, or are there some folks who haven't read it? Okay, I see a couple of heads shaking no, so that's fine, because this first week I'm proceeding as if you have not read the book. Here is the book, which you probably can't see. Of course, it might be showing up backwards on the camera, but Life of the Beloved, that's what the cover looks like. Elizabeth's holding it up too. And you can order it as an ebook on Kindle, through Amazon. It's very easy, and it's actually very cheap. I think it was $9 the last time I looked for it. So it's not overly expensive, and it is a quick, easy read, but it's also a very deep and profound read as well. So I encourage you to do that. This week, we can get by without reading it. It will help to read it for the next few weeks. I do plan on us going for about 5 weeks with this. We will probably take a break for the middle of May because we're going to do on Thursday night an Ascension Day service. So we'll take a break that week so we can do that service, and then we'll probably close the week after that. So let me just give a little context for this book, but then I'll pose a couple of things for the conversation. So first of all, if you don't know who Henri Nouwen is, and if you do, just please bear with me for a minute. Henri Nouwen was a Roman Catholic priest, 20th century priest, one of the most prolific Catholic writers of the 20th century. Very big social justice advocate, but was a social justice advocate in a variety of ways. He was an academic. He taught at Yale Divinity School for a long time. He taught at divinity schools in Central America for a long time. Very strong advocate of the poor. Are any of you familiar with the L'Arche community, the community of disabled folks? That's a fairly international community. He was one of the founders of that community. We had one of those in Mobile. In fact, one of our shared Episcopal ministries was the L'Arche community, and it was a community of those with physical or cognitive disabilities who lived together and had some paid staff taking care of them, but had a lot of volunteers from churches and from the community who would come in and just help serve with them and just be with them and have a community with them. And Henri Nouwen, a lot of his books, this one also to some extent is grounded in that, was his relationship with those who he called those who people forgotten, but God remembered always, because he would constantly recount the fact that those folks in the L'Arche community were some of the people who taught him the most of anyone that he was around. So his passion for those who were considered the quote unquote outcasts of society was very evident in all of his writings and this one. So that's just a little bit of background, giving you the very 30,000 foot version of Nouwen's life. You can read more about him on your own. This book, the prologue of this book, is what I want to focus on and kind of jump off with our conversation today. So Nouwen, when he was teaching back in the early 80s at Yale Divinity School, he was sitting in his office and got a call from a reporter from the New York Times who was coming to do a little write-up on his writings and his theology, because he was fairly well known at that time. And so this writer comes in and sits down, and it becomes evident to Nouwen, and you can read the story on your own, and if you have, you can kind of jump in with some other thoughts on this. But this reporter sits down and starts interviewing him, and it's clear to Nouwen right away that it's just sort of a job for this reporter. And he's listening to him and listening to his questions, and realizes as he's talking to him that this is a pretty talented reporter, but it's clear that he hates what he does. And after the reporter has done his obligatory interview, as he's getting up, Nouwen essentially looks at him and says, "Do you like your job?" Which is sort of a brazen thing to ask somebody, especially if you spent some time interviewing with you. And so they start engaging in this back and forth, and Nouwen just keeps on asking him questions about, what is it you want to do? What is your passion? What do you think would be fulfilling for you, instead of just writing these things that you do to make money, as you say? And the reporter's name's Fred, tells Nouwen that he wants to write a novel. That's really what his passion in life is, but he doesn't have the time and he doesn't have the money, and so this litany of excuses. And so as he's getting ready to leave, Nouwen essentially offers him a year of working at Yale Divinity School to be able to work on his novel. And you can read the whole story, but essentially what happens, he doesn't write the novel, doesn't really finish it, but during the process of working in residence at Yale, he and Nouwen become very good friends. And they build up this relationship that stays constant throughout the years as both of them go their separate ways for a while. Nouwen travels to Central America. Fred, the reporter, goes through a bad divorce, kind of goes through some job transitions. But he and Nouwen maintain a constant communication, and they start to grow in spite of their differences. Nouwen being a Catholic priest, and Fred, the reporter, was a secular Jew. But they maintained a very strong dialogue about faith and about religion. And as Nouwen tells it, one day they're walking along, going through the streets of New York, and Fred looks at him and says, "Why don't you write a book that speaks to people like me?" Nouwen's kind of taken aback, and he says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, your books that you've written so far are books that are very good, but I mean, my friends and I who are not Christians, who aren't your target audience, don't really get a whole lot out of them." And he says, "Why don't you write something that appeals to me? Come meet my friends, come talk to them and spend some time with them and listen to what they're saying. And with your immense talent and ability to articulate God to people who already know God, I want you to try to articulate God to people who are like me, who don't really know the message very well." And so that is the origin of this book, Life of the Beloved. And there is one part of this that I want to read. And if you have your book, it's on page 22. And this is where I want to jump off with our conversation tonight. It is the bottom of page 22. Nouwen says, it becomes for me the most pertinent and the most urgent of all demands to speak to this. Speak to us, meaning Fred and his friends, about the deepest yearning of our hearts, about our many wishes, about hope, not about the many strategies for survival in this world, but about trust, not about new methods of satisfying our emotional needs, but about love. Speak to us about a vision larger than our changing perspectives and about a voice deeper than the clamorings of our mass media. Speak to us about something or someone greater than ourselves. Speak to us about God, for real, not just some theological articulation. So at the beginning of this book, after he goes through the prologue, the very first chapter, he says, what can I say to Fred and to his friends? And I can come up with one word, and that is to say, in God, you are the beloved. And that is the one thing, this whole book, if you boil it down, it is that word, the beloved. And so as we gather here as this group, and as I am so happy to see all of your faces, as we all go through a world in which we're all, in many ways, listening to the words of our liturgy in very different ways. We're saying our prayers in different ways. Our lives are certainly being lived. Hey, Philip. Hey, buddy. Our lives are certainly being lived in very different ways. The word beloved, to me, strikes a tone that is something that I need to hear, because obviously in my case, I have Sarah and I have James Henry, and right now I have my in-laws, Barbara and Richard, and sometimes the beloved can be a little stretched living in a house with 4 adults, a 4-year-old, and an insane dog. But all of us are in different places right now, obviously, but the commonality that we have right now is not just our faith, but the fact that we're spending a lot of time at home. We're spending a lot of time looking at the walls of our house and finding ways to learn what it means, not just to survive, but to what it means to be human in this time that we're in. And I picked this book because it is for 2 reasons. One is the relevance of this topic of being the beloved, and also for the fact that as we're fasting from Eucharist, as we're not physically gathering right now, one of the heart of this book is he speaks about the Eucharistic actions, but frames our lives in terms of the actions of Jesus at the Eucharist, how Jesus takes the bread, Jesus blesses the bread, Jesus breaks the bread, and Jesus gives the bread. And he talks about that as an image for life in general, how God takes us, how God blesses us, how God breaks us, and then how God shares us and shares himself, or God's self, with us in our lives and throughout the world. I want to start a conversation by posing a question to you. And keep in mind, this conversation can go whatever direction we want it to go, but this is just sort of the starting point of this conversation. For ourselves, if we were to, I mean, you can use his word, but for me, I have my own word and I'll share it in a little bit, but I want to hear from y'all first. If you could phrase God in one word, what would that one word be? Does anybody want to try that one out? That's a big question.
Love.
And say more. That's going to be my follow-up, is when you say love, tell me what that means for you.
You didn't tell me there'd be a test.
I know. It's a bait and switch tactic.
Love means taking care of people. Love means providing for people. Love means teaching people how to behave in a society without stepping on everybody else's toes.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got for the moment.
Good, thank you.
The first word I thought of was peace. Yeah, peace.
Anything you want to share further with that?
Well, if God's in my life, that means hopefully I'm not trying to control everything, which, you know, I talk to him about that quite a bit. But if I'm controlling, I don't have peace. And if I don't have peace, I can't really love people because I'm living in fear if I'm trying to control everything, or I wouldn't be trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I have found for myself. You know, for many years I felt like I had to control everything. And then when I was told I didn't, I was shocked. But yeah, so my relationship with God, I mean, it's constantly changing as far as how much I rely on him. But I know today that really that's the only way I'm going to have peace. So.
Good, thank you.
I picked the same word as Judith, but I think for me, love is I can't screw up so bad that he won't be there. It's kind of like my kids. I think that would be the analogy I would use. I mean, there's things that I don't like that they do, and they're going to disappoint me. I mean, I'm going to have a whole gamut of emotions with them, but I can't envision ever not loving him.
Great, thank you.
I feel like that's the same way with God. He might be really happy with me one day, and he might be mad as hell with me another day, but he's going to still be there. No matter how hard I try to push him away, he's still there.
The word that comes to mind for me is mystery. That's partly because of conversations I have with my son. And when we've been doing this for, how old is he now? 20 years, let's say. And in answer to one question he asked, I said, well, we agreed that God is not a white guy with blue eyes on a throne with a white beard. I think he thought he'd made great progress with me. And then he said, so what is God? And I said, God is mystery. And he said, oh, I can live with that. And I thought, okay, now that I've planted that seed, I need to explore it. But it's true, because no matter where I am, it's where I need to be, and it can be used. No matter how much control I think I have, I don't. And regardless of what happens, there's going to be something useful that comes out of it.
Thank you.
Peace is the first thing that I think about, but then an extension of that is comfort. Knowing that, and I guess love to all of them, but comfort knowing that God's always there. I'm never alone. If I've had a bad day or I'm struggling with something, he's there. If I'm having a great day, he's there. If I make a mistake, he's there. And so maybe actually present is a better word for me.
Good word. By the way, what are you cooking for us there?
Spaghetti.
Yummy.
Oh,
think something that's really, it's hard to pick just one word, and I think that changes frequently. What word is most prominent? I think stillness is something that I've been experiencing a lot lately. I do a lot of contemplative prayer, and finding, like, when I first started, I just thought, okay, I'm gonna set the timer for 5 minutes. And I remember sort of peeking at the clock, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's only 2.5 minutes. It's gonna take forever. And then very, very soon I got adapted to having 5 minutes of stillness, and then it was the chime would go, and it wasn't enough. And so I feel like there is the presence of God within everybody, and we have all these distractions, and we never stop to listen, and to be open to that stillness. And that stillness is always there, and it's always accessible. You know, if you're waiting in line at the grocery store or not, or waiting in line online to buy groceries, or that peaceful stillness is always there. And it's kind of, once you know it's there and you sort of find a way to access it, it becomes like those living waters where you don't realize just how thirsty you were for it.
Thank you. The word I have is hope, which is, you know, another word shared by a lot of people. And I'm not going to share too much personal detail since we're recording on and putting this on YouTube, although I would feel comfortable with y'all if it was just us sitting here together. Sarah and I have had a lot of things in our life that, and I say this in full awareness, there's people who have had far, far worse things that have happened to them. We've always had a roof over our head. We've had food to eat, and we've had our love to sustain us through things. But we've gone through a good deal of trials and grief and tragedy. And there have been several occasions in life for me where it was hard to see what the next was beyond where I was at the moment. And I've laughed with several people since we've been here in Oak Ridge, because I'm sure all of y'all have seen when you drive in Pellissippi, right there by the Arboretum, the sign, "It will be okay." And we drive by that all the time when we go to Knoxville. It is reassuring in a way. And then, but I also say, you know, it's not just empty words when we have hope. God, it is that there truly is a future, which doesn't mean it won't be born of pain or have something with grief and loss. Those things still come as part of the journey, but with those things comes a transformation, in the sense that the lack of possibility that I see for my own control or desire to control things, a couple of you used that word already, that's not what determines my future, which is very comforting for me to know that something much bigger than me is the one that sets the future beyond what I can see. And that hope is something I keep coming back to, and it's something that as a priest, when I sit with people who are going through a tough time, that's what I always come back to, is hope. You know, faith, hope, and love. Hope is that one that at least allows us to see that there's always a future when we believe in God and cling to God. And to use Victoria's word, it's a mystery how that works. I don't really always quite understand or grasp it. It is there nonetheless. Thank you all for sharing on that. So as we jump off now, we'll say this about Nouwen. He does not say this in the book, but he does say this in some of his other writings, and as a reflection from his work on this book, that he realized as a theologian, and I think all of us as priests in my vocation recognize that. I think we all would say this too, that we've experienced this in the church. We tend to make God a lot more complicated. God needs to be. God is infinite. God is a mystery. God is beyond our understanding. And yet, the voluminous writings that we have in theology make God almost some sort of great physics problem that cannot be solved, wherein God is in many ways very simple, very present, very much there. And the thing that Fred, the journalist, Nouwen's friend, asked Nouwen to write about, those words that I read to you earlier, was we live in a world that is full of things, particularly that are things that are slowing, that need to slow down. We live in a world that is full of distractions. How can God speak to us in a world that is so full of distraction? Kind of my next introduction to conversation would be asking you then, and this is kind of where we're at right now, what has, and again, don't go into great personal detail on this, but what has challenged your faith through these last 6 to 8 weeks, where we have been isolated, physically at least? Trapped is a word that I've heard used by a couple of people. We've lost Betsy, by the way. I think we may have had a storm issue at her house. What has been the biggest challenge? And I've kind of got a question that'll follow up with that. And I'll start with this one. The two challenges. One is contextual for me. It's being new here again, feeling very unsettled, living in an extended transition has been challenging. I'm a person that likes routine. I'm a person that likes feeling like I've got a home base to operate from. And I say this with all gratitude toward my in-laws who we're staying with, because they've been wonderful to us. But it is like we're living in this extended liminal period, and with all these things changing, what is there to hold on to right now? And then the world is now changing and spiraling way beyond our control. The other part that is a challenge for me right now, and Elizabeth and I, and I'm not going to say what she said, but we were sort of chatting about this earlier today. I just feel like I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. My sense of my vocation, my job, my sense of what my responsibilities are to other people in my family, even though those are the people I see physically, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing. And when reading this book has given me some perspective, because obviously his context is talking about his friendship with Fred, and then speaking in a language to people who were either lost, whether they are admitting they're lost or they're just sort of trapped in the rat race of life. And there's a sense of me feeling lost, not in a spiritual way, but just sort of not really being able to get my fingers into anything and not really knowing what I'm supposed to do. And so the message of knowing I'm the beloved reminds me that it's not due to any merit or thing that I'm doing, but I'm the beloved. As Betsy said, that love is there for us no matter what. I still just carry around that guilt from my Calvinist background. I have a lot of that. Carry around that guilt of I should be doing something that I was doing before, but I just can't right now. So those are my challenges. Anybody else want to speak as to what has been challenging for them right now?
I think tagging on to what Father Bailey was just talking about is, there's a lot of not knowing, and trying to be okay with it, but at the same time, making huge adaptations to try to do what we've always done. People keep saying, oh, you guys are doing such a good job with all the videos and the services. And it might look like we've just sort of bent a little bit, but it feels like we're contortionists because we've had to really, really, really stretch. And there's sort of that a feeling of, I know a little bit of how to do some of this, and I'm going to learn. I have to learn very quickly. Can I get it done? And knowing that, if something had happened during Holy Week and something didn't work technologically, it would still be fine. But it would, there was that sort of pressure. But I think that the challenge is trying to maintain inner peace when you don't have any concrete answers and you can't sort of go back to all the standard habits that you used to have that worked in the past. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. It does.
I have been challenged
You know,
by not having enough contact. Wes and I are happy here in the house together, and I go to the grocery store, but I woke up one morning thinking I really want to go to a restaurant. I want to hear, and it was more for the ambiance, the noise and the excitement around that I miss, not so much the food, but I've realized I'm really not an introvert at all. I've got a couple of friends who are very, very happy to stay put and just kind of settle in, but that's apparently not who I am.
I am, about a month before the pandemic really started up. I mean, I think probably it was starting to happen home. And I don't do good with, I can't leave my house, or I can't.
Connie, can you hear us?
Introvert.
There we go.
No, now I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. I think we may be running into the complication of the storm now.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Let me get back in there. Okay, hold on.
We can hear your
I don't know
voice.
what I did. I hit.
That's
the wrong-
okay.
Okay.
Just blame it on the
Okay.
storm.
A few weeks. He really didn't want me to go to some things that I went to where there were large groups of people. So I was like, uh-oh, now, that's being taken away. And, that book, Who Moved My Cheese? I have thought about during this because everything's been moved, and I have had some good days. I try to look at this like I know there's a lot of growth in this. I do prayer meditation every morning, and I've had a lot more time to do that. So that's been a good thing for me. I try to call somebody, at least once or twice a day. I have some women that I mentor, and
I think we lost her again. We'll come back to her because I think she got. Anybody else want to jump in? We're cutting in and out here. I know it's the storm outside. Well, while we kind of wait for that, Connie, we're going to go ahead and kind of move on because it's cutting in and out real bad on your end. So, and
that's cool.
when we get your signal back in, we can come back to you, but it's still pretty erratic on, at least from my end here. this is another part of this I want to share with you, and this is kind of the follow-up to this, and really kind of the last thing I want to bring us out in the conversation tonight, because I want to end this when we're scheduled to end, which is 7:30. But he writes, once he gets into the first chapter, he writes, "The greatest gift my friendship can give to you is the gift of your belovedness. I can give that gift only insofar as I have claimed it for myself. Isn't that what friendship is all about? Giving to each other the gift of our belovedness." And that statement is so powerful for many things. And I'm going to just kind of ask if you can reflect on any of that you wish. But that sentence, particularly, I can give that gift only insofar as I've claimed it for myself. And that's always one of my struggles, is the struggle to claim God's belovedness. And I struggle with claiming that, as I said earlier. But the sense that we can only share that belovedness for what we claim it and own it for ourselves. Kind of the I want to go with this is, as we've talked about our challenges, for me, the challenge, as I said, of trying to figure out what it is I'm supposed to be doing right now has come with this added gift of connecting, first of all, connecting with people here at St. Stephen's that I don't know on varying different levels, and really having to work at making those relationships happen, like with things like this, which I'm not very familiar with, or with doing pastoral calls for very serious things over the phone, or in the case of, I actually have started writing letters. It's like, it's so retro to write letters now, but writing letters to people. And it has helped me to connect with people that I'm just meeting and people that I've known for a long time in some very new ways that have brought to remembrance to me how special it is to just have contact with people. And you know, I still have the joy, maybe it's my generation, I'm 40 or 41 as of Tuesday, and still have the remembrance of getting things in the mail when I was little from my grandmother, and then from my mother when I moved away, and just the joy of getting something in the mail like that. Just these different ways that we've had to connect have reminded me of the fact that my belovedness is connected to people, and I'm finding so many different ways that I've connected with people, and has really brought to mind the importance of that community and finding the ways in which that community can be important to me, but also how I can continue to help make it important for the people who are in my life, whether they're family, friends, people here at church, or whatnot. What is some way that you have learned through these challenging and difficult times, the perhaps new ways in which you've discovered community, or maybe for yourself discover how much God loves you and that you are the beloved? Kind of take it in whatever direction you want, but what are some positive growth or great spiritual insights that you've learned, particularly with community or your own sense of relationship to God, that you've learned over these last 6 weeks?
Someone had an idea.
Ding.
Well, I would say the biggest thing the biggest sense or that I get is this feeling of having everything I need. That, I mean, when this whole pandemic first started, there was this huge, oh my gosh, are we ever going to be able to buy toilet paper again? But it's really that fear of, I won't get what I want. And I think people are really only afraid of two things: that they won't get what they want, or that what they have will be taken away. And I, through, organizing yarn or whatever, I definitely have this overwhelming sense of, I have everything I need. maybe not necessarily everything that I've wanted, but everything that I feel like God has given me as a gift. And I don't need to constantly seek outside to find more things that are going to make me feel the belovedness. Mm-hmm. And in fact, more becomes the distraction of getting in the way of making that connection. Opportunities that have come up have been things as simple as like just talking with our neighbor. I mean, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, okay, we all have to go to the grocery store. I will go and pick up her groceries. And so now we've got synchronized shopping carts where we shop and we make sure that we have our regular deliveries at a certain day, a certain time. And it's just very matter of fact. And I think that goes back to what you were saying, Father Bailey, about it. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be really simple. And, starting small is still a start. And I think at a certain point, or at least I'm getting to this point where, I want to have a greater sense of hope of being the beloved. And part of believing that is having self-acceptance. And it's like, really, with, bad hair, of course, with, needing to lose some weight or something. Yes, of course, God still loves me that way, no matter what. And I think getting to self-acceptance really gets you that much closer to accepting the belovedness.
I'm fortunate that I'm able to be useful during all this. And at the end of the week, I can come home and think back over the conversations I've had on the phone. And I realized that I don't even think about feeling beloved because I'm in a position where I can give other people a little comfort, a little kindness, just telling them when the food banks are. People are frightened. And for some reason, I'm not. We don't have to go into that. And therefore, I'm in a position to do what needs to be done. And so far, I've done it with an amount of grace that is truly not mine. And that, on reflection, is a product of the fact that I am beloved, whether I stop to think about it or not.
I like that image of, the fact that we are dealing with a lot of people who are frightened. Some of us may be frightened too, but you're offering something to people, a sense of peace that desperately needed. Mm-hmm. And whether it's deliberately communicated or whether it's subconsciously, you are communicating something wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else?
Not having stuff. I mean, my husband is a big shopper, so he was prepared from the beginning, and I was like, oh, everything's going to be fine. But gratitude for me. And
Honey, I hate to say this, every time you get going with one of your good thoughts, the weather is interfering with that. So
I know. I think that's my ego not wanting me to talk. So anyway.
Well,
But that's it.
well, what I could hear bits and pieces of what you were saying, and thank you for sharing. Let me go ahead and say we still have a few minutes, but we don't have to go to 7:30. Let me say, unless somebody else wants to share, let me say a couple of things, and then I'll kind of give a final thought and reflection for tonight. So, two questions. One's a question, one's a statement for next week. First question, the question is, does this time work for this? And since y'all are the ones who are here live, y'all get to help me make that decision. Those who'll be joining us in YouTube land later who are watching the recording of this, they can give input through email. But does this 6:30 time work? Does it need to be earlier? Does it need to be later? So I know we're all kind of a little different background here and different kind of pace of our life.
I can't do earlier on Thursday.
You cannot do earlier? Okay.
I have another meeting at 5.
Okay, so 6:30 definitely works for you at the earliest.
It would be
For me
okay.
too.
Okay.
6:30.
Yeah, 6:30 works for me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
It's good.
Good. Adam, you're making me hungry, by the way. I keep looking at your steaming your pasta pot there, and it's making me hungry. So that was my question. So next time, if you have not already ordered the book, please try to get an e-copy, or as I said, I don't know what Amazon's up to these days with shipping books, but so I don't know when you get a hard copy, but obviously you can get an e-version instantly if you order it online. And so in that, what I'd like you to read is the introductory chapter, read the prologue, which is kind of what we went over today. The first chapter is called Being the Beloved. And then we'll start to get into the first section of the next chapter, which is the meat of the book, which is called Becoming the Beloved. And that is the part where it dives into the 4 elements of the Eucharist. And the first part is the part that's called Taken, where Jesus takes the bread. And this is the part of the book that just really, to me, starts digging into, well, let's just say it speaks to me on a number of levels when we start getting to that element of how do we become the beloved. My final thought is an emphasis, though, on being the beloved. And y'all have said this in your own way. I just want to remind you, this is me as your priest talking and as your friend, that you are the beloved. You are doing some wonderful things out there. But it's, again, as I said earlier, it's not defined by what we do. It is defined by who we are. And as Gloria said, a lot of people are frightened. There's a lot of fears, a lot of anxiety, and I know that among us there's probably some anxiety, to say the least, if not among us, certainly with our family or people that we know. And just remember, as I heard somebody say not too long ago, and it was somebody here at the church, somebody said they just felt like they were spinning on a wheel, like a gerbil wheel except it was detached and moving. It was out of control, and they didn't know where it was going, and they just felt so detached even from God's love. And a lot of that was because they couldn't do what they usually did as far as taking care of family, as far as they have a job that they were taking care of other people who were in need, and they just could not do those things. And my answer to that person is the same thing I will remind you is, the day we were created, from the day we were born, we are God's beloved, and we are the people that God has made in the image of God to be people who were called to love and called to be loved. And right now, we are learning different ways to do both. And we are being the beloved in this strange and unique place that we are in our culture and in our church right now. And I just remind you of that because here as we gather together, again, so thankful to see all of you, and so thankful that other people will be joining us watching this recording later. that here we are trying to find new ways, not just of trying to figure out what the church is. We are being the church. We are being the church by gathering here. We're being the church by praying for each other. We're being the church by comforting people around us. We're being the church by allowing ourselves to be comforted and having our needs met when they need to be met. And if we're being the church, we are being the beloved of God. And I want you to take that message, but I also want you to share that message with one another. That's my benediction for you as we go forth tonight, is for you to go forth as the beloved of God and to announce with great joy and hopefulness that we are all the beloved of God, because that's the message that we all need to hear, that in our lack of control and our lack of knowing what comes next, that's the one thing we can hold on to, is we know we are the beloved of God. We can share that joy with one another. Any final thoughts or comments before we close up shop for tonight?
Thank you for having this. This is
Well,
really cool.
It is my pleasure. It is my deep gratitude to you for being here again, so I can see you and interact with you and just be able to have this time for us to have conversation, but to also dig at it at a deeper level as well. So same time, same place next week. And if there's anything you need, if you know of anyone in need, don't hesitate to give me a call. Let's, again, just continue to be the beloved and go forth in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thank you to all of you. I hope you all have a good weekend, and we will see each other again soon. And
You
hopefully
too.
physically, whenever that materializes and comes.
Yeah.
All right, everyone.
Take
right.
care.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.